What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another Week 13, or as I like to call it, Rivalry Week preview this week. And we have another giant rivalry this weekend. Not even this weekend, this Thursday night, Thanksgiving night, after you ate all the food you possibly could desire, after you visited all the family. There's only one game you got to watch, man. Just bump all the NFL games. No one really cares about regular season NFL football. It's all about the Egg Bowl on Thursday night. The battle for Mississippi bragging rights is going down in Stark Vegas this weekend as the number 9 Ole Miss Rebels travel to Starkville to take on Mississippi State. 6:30 p.m. Central Time, live on ESPN on Thanksgiving night. And shockingly, again, this continues the streak. I believe it's almost 5 or 6 straight weeks now where we've had a top 10 underdog, as the Bulldogs are a 1.5 point favorite over Ole Miss right now. And I don't know how it happens, but it keeps on happening. So we're going to see if that's a good line. But it's been 50-50. You look at Utah last week, but Oregon also beat UCLA, and it's been up and down. But this weekend, man, the Egg Bowl couldn't be any bigger. You have two teams, one fighting for a possible New Year's Six Bowl, and and of course, all the bragging rights are on the line when these two teams face off on Thanksgiving night. But Mississippi State has already exceeded expectations, and Ole Miss, to a point, has as well. We have two of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, and overall, this matchup I feel like is being greatly overlooked in terms of national implications and ranking of the most important games this week. But when you look at this matchup, let's set the stage before we break down this game. The Rebels enter 9-2, 5-2 in the SEC. They're riding a 3-game win streak since their loss at Jordan Hare Stadium. But Lane Kiffin has this Ole Miss team in perfect position to receive a New Year's Six Bowl bid, and that'll be their first New Year's Six Bowl appearance since 2015 when the Rebels went to the Sugar Bowl. Now, you look at Mississippi State, they enter 7-4, 4-3 in the SEC, and they've really exceeded all expectations in Mike Leach's second season. They were picked dead last in the SEC West in the preseason, and right now they have an opportunity to potentially move all the way up to second in this division. Now, you look at this team, and they're riding a 2-game win streak, including a 28-3 comeback win over Auburn. Mike Leach's air raid attack, man, they are looking to notch another top 20 win. I don't know what it is about this Mississippi State team. They underperform against teams they're supposed to beat and then overperform against teams they're not supposed to beat. This will be their fifth top 20 win of the season, guys. So Mississippi State has played spoiler before, and they're looking to do it again when their arch rivals come into town. Now, the Egg Bowl has a long storied history, man. It's the signature Mississippi rivalry that dates back to 1901. The Rebels lead the overall series 63-56, and they won last year's matchup in Oxford. But the series is tied 3-3 over the past 6 matchups between these two teams. So it's been extremely competitive, and most of these games have come down to single digit differences in one possession here, one position there, or one possession there. So anything can happen this weekend. That's why the spread's close. That's why everyone is excited to watch what goes down on Thursday night. So we have the stage set for this one. Let's get into the keys of the game, and we're going to start with Ole Miss, who their key, and every time I cover Ole Miss, this is usually the key I go with because it doesn't change game to game like some teams due to matchups. When you have a player the caliber of Matt Corral at the quarterback spot as a team, that has to be your key week in and week out. Put the ball in his hands and say, I need you to go win me this game. And when he's one of the Heisman Trophy favorites, when this offense has really started and ended with Corral's play, he has to be the key because against this sneaky good Mississippi State defense that's only allowing about 320 yards per game, Corral right now is absolutely the focal point of an offense that's averaging 517 yards per game. And you look at this top 20 scoring offense with almost 38 points per game. Matt Corral is the focal point of that. He's the driving force behind it. And if you're Lane Kiffin, you have to give your ball to the best player and say, listen, this is a big moment against a very good team. Go win us the game. Go put your teammates in good situations, make the throws you need, and let your athletes make the plays for you on the outside. And I think that's going to be the key right now for Ole Miss going into this weekend. Look at Corral, man. Over 3,000 yards passing, 19 passing touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, over 550 yards rushing, and 10 rushing touchdowns. You look at where he ranks, man. He's top 3 in the conference in passing yards, top 5 in completion percentage, top 6 in touchdowns, and still top 5 in yards per attempt and QBR for the season. This guy is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. A lot of people have him as QB1 going into the NFL draft, but when you look at where he really excels, he's dangerous with his legs and his arm. When things break down in the pocket, it really makes it hard on the defense to either have to use a spy or he's going to get loose in the pocket if things break down. Over 300 yards rushing on just scrambles when things get out of whack and Matt Corral just goes and makes a play. And that's what makes him so special. Almost 7 yards per carry on those. And he has 14 first downs on broken plays and 6 explosive runs and can make people miss as he has over 120 yards after contact just on these broken plays. So that's where Matt Corral can make a living. And that's what Mississippi State has to limit is you cannot allow Corral to become dynamic with both his legs and his arm. And when you look at, this Rebels offense, as great as Corral is, the underrated part that I feel like people overlook because a lot of people, see the stats and see the gaudy numbers and hear Corral, 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 but the rushing attack outside of Corral is absolutely an important factor for this offense. They're averaging over 230 on the ground per game, almost 3 touchdowns per game on the ground. But you look at a Henry Parrish, a Snoop Connor, a Jerry and Ely, these guys are also going to be critical to this Ole Miss offense to stay a bit balanced against a defense that really thrives in trying to limit explosive plays. So if you can run the ball and allow Corral and these wide receivers to get some one-on-one opportunities outside, that's going to be key for Ole Miss. You look at Parrish over 500 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. Connor over 560, 11 touchdowns, and Ely came on strong these past few weeks with over 600 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. They have a three-headed monster, and you could point to multiple games this year where one or another took over the game for Ole Miss. So I'm interested to see how they use the rotation and which running back really steps up to be the main focus guy against a stout Mississippi State defense. They're very unique and they're able to attack multiple gaps and they're able to attack them creatively. They can be creative because these guys are so explosive, so quick, and they also have a little bit of a pass catching ability and able to play the slot sometimes. They're able to get out of the backfield and make some plays in open space. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on Mississippi State to make some plays in the open field and also be disciplined in their gap integrity because if you miss a gap or over pursue, all three of these guys can turn it into a big play and get to the end zone in a 1-2 play drive. Now, you look at the wide receiving core as well, man. They have to have a big game. And I'm just going to name 2 names before moving on. Dontario, Drummond, and Shakur Pearson are going to be the 2 guys I'm looking at. Drummond leads the team with over 780 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. And Pearson really wasn't expected to be a big contributor, but due to injuries this year, which Ole Miss has really struggled with at the wide receiving spot, this walk-on has earned his way to be one of the biggest pieces in this Ole Miss passing attack. Pearson had a giant game in Jordan Hare, and he had some great catches against A&M as well. So I think Pearson is going to be someone to watch as well, along with Drummond, to see if they can create some separation and make some things happen against a very good Mississippi State secondary. Now, on the other sideline, man, listen, do I even have to say it? what do you think the key is for this air raid attack, man? If you watch the Mike Leach game, he's going to hand the ball to Will Rogers and this talented wide receivers and say, I need you to throw it 56 times. I want, most teams, they come into a game, especially some of these run focused teams, are like, we're going to pound the rock. We're going to wear down your defense and run it down your throat. Mike Leach said, don't worry, I'm going to give the ball to my quarterback and let him throw it down your throat. And this Ole Miss defense is going to have to step up. They're allowing about 240 yards per game this season through the air, and they're facing arguably the best passing attack that they have seen all season long, man. Over 390 yards passing through the air right now for Mississippi State per game. That's second in the entire country. It leads the SEC by far. And this weekend, the X factor for me, the number one player that's going to determine whether Mississippi State can win this weekend is Will Rogers. He's completed over 76% of his passes, over 4,100 yards, 34 passing touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He leads the SEC in passing yards, completion percentage. He's second in passing touchdowns, and he's still top 6 in QBR. So for me, Will Rogers, arguably, outside of Bryce Young, is probably the best quarterback that Ole Miss has seen all season long. And Rogers brings a different type of, dynamic passing ability that even Bryce Young has. And this Mississippi State passing attack has really hit its stride over the past few weeks. His performance in the second half in Jordan-Hare was one of the best performances and most impressive ones of the year. So this is going to be an amazing quarterback matchup to watch between Rodgers and Corral this weekend. Now, the most impressive aspect of Rodgers' game to me is his ability to attack defenses using short to intermediate passes. That accounts for over 60% of his total throws. But when the deep ball gets going, they set up the deep ball by throwing underneath, making your safeties start looking downfield, and they're going to hit you over the top. And when he uncorks the deep ball, guys, he is so efficient, and that's going to be the key this weekend. You have to be explosive. If you're Mississippi State, you feel good because your defense right now is probably a little bit better than what Ole Miss has statistically, and you got the home field advantage. If you can put pressure on Corral and that offense to have to score every time they touch the ball, that's going to be where I think Mississippi State really thrives. You look at his downfield passing this year, guys. It only accounts for I wouldn't say very much of his throws at all, but I mean, 51% completion percentage on passes 20 plus yards down the field, 10 passing touchdowns, 20 big time throws, and a 95.7 passing grade on passes 20 plus yards down the field for Will Rogers, and it accounts for less than 15% of his total throws. So that's going to be something interesting to see if Mike Leach lets him kind of air it out this weekend deep down the field and try to put some pressure on the back end of this Ole Miss defense. Now, dumping underneath, man, he's thrown for 22 touchdowns, over 150 first downs generated, and over 72% of his passes completed. So Will Rogers is going to put a lot of pressure on linebackers and safeties to cover out in space, and that's why this air raid attack has been so successful, because they find the matchup, they spread you out, and eventually there's going to be someone who doesn't cover their guy perfectly, and that's where Will Rogers is going to take advantage. Now, you look at this wide receiving core, they're going to be an X factor for Mississippi State. They do not run the ball. They get the running backs involved in the passing game, and it's an extension of their rushing attack rather than just handing the ball off to the running back. Because you look at a Jaquarius Marks, that's their running back. He has 73 catches, guys, for over 400 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. He ranks top 5 in the SEC in total catches this year as a running back. And Dylan Johnson, the backup, has 53 catches, which is still tied for 6th in the SEC. They would rather get their running backs out into space and do short dump off passes to them rather than hand the ball off. And so, as much as people want to say Mike Leach doesn't quote unquote run the football, his passing attack is an extension of that, and he does it so well where a lot of people really overlook what he's actually trying to set up. But the guy to watch out for, man, Makai Polk this weekend is going to be huge for Mississippi State. 88 catches for almost 900 yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. He ranks third in the country in catches. That's first in the SEC, top 5 in receiving yards, and top 3 in touchdowns. Polk was instrumental in their comeback over Auburn. This weekend, he has to be able to exploit his matchup and find ways to make plays. Jaden Wally, Austin Williams, Malik Heath are all other guys that you have to watch if you're Ole Miss, because they have 4 or 5 guys that can go take over a game, and you have to try to find a way to slow down this air raid attack, or you're going to be in trouble if you're Ole Miss. Now, the matchup to watch, it's real easy just to say Ole Miss's DBs versus Mississippi State's wide receivers, but we kind of already broke the wide receivers down. For me, actually, I think it's going to be Ole Miss's defensive line against Mississippi State's offensive line, because the number one thing for Ole Miss on the road is to get pressure on Rodgers and make him feel uncomfortable in the pocket. Don't allow him to set up those quick intermediate throws, and definitely don't allow him to get the deep ball going. If they can get him off his spot and force him into some mistakes, Ole Miss has a great chance, because you know your offense is good enough with extra possessions and good field positions to run the score up on this team. So you know that's going to be a key if you can get pressure and force them into mistakes. Now, you look at the Mississippi State offensive line, they perform well at times, but due to quick passes and Rodgers' pocket presence, they've really played well because of that, but they still only rank 10th in the SEC with 27 sacks allowed this season, and that's going to be key this weekend not to allow Will Rogers to get hit repeatedly, and especially get that clock in his head going. When you've got a great quarterback like this, you want him to feel you even when you're not getting pressure. You want to hit him early and often, get some early sacks. That way, even when you don't generate a ton of pressure, he feels like he still has to get rid of the ball quicker than he actually does, and that's where defenses thrive. You look at a Charles Cross, of a Quinston Sharp on this offensive line. They're the top 2 offensive linemen. Only 4 total sacks allowed, 0 QB hits, and less than 30 total pressures allowed between the two of them. They're going to have to be focal points on this offensive line for the Bulldogs. Now, you look at Rodgers under pressure. He's only been pressured on 16.2% of his dropbacks this season. But when he's been pressured, his completion percentage drops to about 50%, thrown for less than 350 yards. His yards per completion drops to 4.9, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, and his passing grade drops to a 45 in terms of Pro Football Focus's scale. So that is a huge drop off from what we're seeing in his normal production. So getting to Will Rogers is going to be key for Ole Miss. And this Ole Miss defensive line and front seven does not get enough credit. They've been impressive this year as they've ranked tied second in the SEC with Alabama, with 37 sacks generated this season. And if the Rebels can wreak havoc and live in the backfield of Mississippi State, they have a great shot this weekend to win this game. Now, y'all know the name, man. Sam Williams has had an outstanding year for the Rebels, man. 10 and a half sacks, 13 tackles for loss, and 4 forced fumbles off the edge. Also, Cedric Johnson, 6.5 sacks, 7.5 tackles for loss. And then also a linebacker I want to mention in this front seven who can really get after the quarterback is Chance Campbell, 6 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and 87 total tackles. If Sam Williams is going to be the X factor in this matchup, because if he can generate pressure off the edge, that's going to throw a wrench into what a lot of Mississippi State wants to do. And so if you can get pressure on Rodgers, speed his clock up, force him into mistakes, and never allow that rhythm to get going. That's one thing that we saw in the Auburn game. If Will Rogers gets his rhythm going, it could be a very, very long day. So this Ole Miss defense has to be up to the task, and it starts with Sam Williams, Cedric Johnson, and Chance Campbell in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. Now, I really went back and forth with this game, man. I have like 5 scores that I've like flipped back and forth on, because I really think this game is going to come down to one possession. I think this arguably, in my opinion, probably is the best quarterback battle of the weekend between Rodgers and also Corral. But for me, I'm looking at the defenses, who can make a stop, and I'm also looking at a home field advantage, because I think Starkville is going to buy into this game, especially with both of these teams exceeding any and all expectations that they had coming into the season. So for me, I'm going with, I guess, the quote unquote ranked upset, not a line upset. I'm picking the Bulldogs for a home upset win in Starkville, 30-27 over Ole Miss. I think these two teams are going to play hard. And I'm telling you guys, I will be shocked if we don't have a lead change all the way up to my predicted score. I can see this being back and forth and back and forth. And I'll be shocked if either team generates more than 7 to maybe 10 points of separation throughout the entire game. I think these two teams are very evenly matched, and I think it's a great stylistic matchup for both of these teams. But for me, I trust Mississippi State's defense to make one stop in Starkville this weekend to win this game. And I just think both quarterbacks have a big day. It just comes down to if a defense can make one play to win the game. So I got Mississippi State 30, Ole Miss 27 this weekend in the Egg Bowl in Starkville, guys. Guys, comment your score predictions below. Let me know your thoughts on the game. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button on the video. Whether you're Ole Miss or Mississippi State fan, man, hit the like button. This video deserves more people to see it, man, because I think there's, even no matter who you're rooting for in the entire country, you've got to watch the Egg Bowl on Thursday night. One of my favorite games of the year to watch. And this year, it's even bigger, especially with the QB matchup. And of course, who doesn't love seeing Lane Kiffin versus Mike Leach, man? That's going to be something to watch as well. But guys, a 3-point win for State this weekend. And we'll be back later today with more Week 13 college football previews. But for right now, guys, the Blue Bloods are out.